Welcome to part 3 of the Savage Rap for Friday. I could talk for a long time today. I'm just in the mood. It releases my tension. Are we going to send people back where they came from? Yeah, when I'm president, I'll get the trains running south. And I'll put the ACLU lawyers on the trains with them because they deserve the best legal care when they get back to the countries that they came from. So we send all the Marvins from the ACLU on the trains with them, and we put the homeless on a few of the cars on every shipment, and we give the countries that ship their flotsam and jetsam to us a taste of what they did to us. You know, these are not the best and the brightest in their country. These are not the philosophers and the scientists and the doctors and the teachers that Guatemala, El Salvador, Nicaragua are sending us. They're sending us the people who are illiterate in their own language that they don't want, or the criminals like Castro did, or the mentally defective. They emptied the jails and the mental hospitals, and they gave them to Biden, who wanted them here in America. Could you believe this? So they would. One other story I wanted to talk about, a childhood story triggered. I know you want to hear about the fly and the tuna, or and the monkey, Louis and the monkey. Great stories. Or the man who got cancer. That was a touching story. I don't want to be touching today. I'm not in a touching mood. I'm not even angry. I'm immune to emotion right now. I'm just wanting to talk with you, my audience. Which story do you want to hear? The electric blue saddle stitch pants, the fly and the tuna, tough high school geometry teacher, 2 fingers on his right hand. That's the one I want to conclude with. There's more. I could do these another time. So I'll tell you about the IRA, the ex-IRA Irish teacher I had. What a tough guy he was. Wow. You know, you ever been around a real tough man? I mean, they're different than you and I. You could feel the power coming off their bodies, and they're usually very, very decent people. Don't mess with them, though. They'll kill you. Tough high school geometry teacher. I had a geometry teacher in high school with only 2 fingers on his right hand. He was a tough guy. He was an Irishman and real tough, but a very good teacher, the kind of teacher who made you come up to the blackboard and perform. He was a math teacher, right? If you didn't, he ridiculed you. He didn't curse you out, but he called you a dummy. As you stood there sweating, he might say, "Now, what's the matter with you today? Is it your brain not functioning?" Can you imagine this? That kind of thing. Believe me, you didn't want to wind up in front of that blackboard not knowing your stuff because you didn't want to be humiliated in front of your peers. That's how we were taught in my day. And he'd have you up there to read out your grades. The lowest grades came up to the blackboard first. The D students had to go up there and explain why they were stupid. Today, of course, they take any moron off the street, any idiot who has one eye going up, one eye going down, who could hardly speak English, and they tell you he's smarter than you are. If you dare to be smarter than him, you go to the back of the class. But in those days, it was very clear. If you were smart, you were smart. If you were stupid, you were dumb. And that was the end of it. No one changed anything. No one came up with fake things about why you were a slow learner. You were a slow learner, whatever it was. So you had an eye that crossed or your brain worked a different way. Sorry, but you were a slow learner. So this geometry teacher, whose name I forget, had a left hand with 5 fingers and a right hand with 2 fingers. 2 fingers were stubs, but he could still put chalk on the board. When he said to you, "The midterm exams are back," he would read out every name and every score publicly. Now, why do you think he did it? Because he understood that by doing well, you were proud of yourself. And the other kids looked up to you. And by doing poorly, you were ashamed of yourself. And you would try to do better. But now, because the liberal nuts took over the schools, where they try to put perversion ahead of everything else, they have now taken dummies and try to make them better than the smarties. Consequently, the schools can't even teach Johnny how to add or read. And if Johnny isn't smart enough and he can't focus at all, they put him on a drug, dope him up, and turn him into a sissy and dumbbell who can't do anything except sit in a cubicle for the rest of his life or go to Harvard Law School and become a Supreme Court justice. Now, how Mr. W lost his fingers is another interesting story. We all heard the rumors. It was whispered in the halls of Jamaica High School that he lost his fingers, and I'm not glorifying it, not at all, planting a bomb for the IRA. I don't know whether it was true or false. Now, I don't know whether it was true or false, but it was certainly enough to make us understand understand not to mess around with this teacher, and we didn't. We respected him. We respected him. And whether it was true or not is irrelevant. That's who we had for a math teacher in those days. Many tough men, most of them vets from World War II and Korea. I'm Michael Savage. I thank you for listening. I think that's going to be it for the day. No, it isn't. I'll do a little bit more of this. Is part 3, so I'm going to do a little bit more. So because I was in a nostalgic mood today, I started looking up things from my childhood on the internet. Beautiful thing with the internet. So I looked up a friend's apartment house. He was like better off than we were. They moved to an expensive apartment somewhere near the Whitestone Bridge. And I said, what was it like today? It still looks nice. I won't mention where. It was nice. His father was the one who owned a bar on the upper east side. It was very unusual for my socioeconomic class to be a bar owner. That's a whole different story that I never wrote about. I've talked about it maybe once. He was our idol, this kid's father. And he was a street fighter. And he wound up a gambler, street fighter, tough as nails. He was Jewish, this other one, as tough as the Irishman, but tougher than all of them. I'm thinking of all the tough men I knew. Because most of the men I knew were like merchants, or they worked in the garment center, like sewing machine repairmen or whatever. They all worked so hard, 6-7 days a week. They all took home their living, and they supported a wife and children. Very few of the women worked in those days. I know it's a shame they didn't, but they didn't work. My mother worked till my father died. Then she worked a little bit, but she didn't have to. He left her a house and a little money. So these guys were tough, and we looked up to them, and they would tell us guys stories, things like, don't be afraid to get punched in the nose. Don't be afraid to lose a tooth. It's only a tooth. I mean, crazy stuff that you can't believe this stuff. So he winds up owning a bar on the Upper East Side near Germantown. I remember to this day, I used to love 86th Street. And they had all those German restaurants on 86th Street. When I grew up, we used to go there, all the kids and I. The teenagers, when we became teenagers, we went to 86th Street to eat German food. Sometimes I crave it to this day. I want to go in a German restaurant and eat food I don't eat anymore, because it was much like my mother's cookery. The steamed meats, the cabbage, the potatoes. Oh, and the steam coming up off the steam trays. Wow, was it delicious. So I don't know, those places still exist. They probably do. I don't eat like that anymore. It killed the whole generation. They all died in their 50s from the heavy food. Smart Germans don't eat German food anymore. Smart Irishmen don't even drink anymore. Last I checked, Ireland had the lowest alcohol intake rate in Europe. That was a few years ago. It's a whole different, world now out there. So I remember this bar man, the guy wound up owning a bar. We all grew up. So I looked up the house I grew up in, 7310 Utopia Parkway in Queens. It's not the house I was born in. I was born in Manhattan, and I lived in the Bronx in a tenement, 829 Longfellow Avenue. That was a different world altogether. That's not there anymore. They knocked those tenements down and built these townhouses. You can't even find the house I grew up in anymore, but the area is there with the land going up to Bryan Avenue, and we'd fight the kids up there with garbage can covers, the Bryan Street gang, and then we were on Longfellow. No one shot each other. We would just try to run up the hill like ants to attack the Bryan Street gang, and they had the advantage of the hill, and they would throw ashes down upon us. Now, the ashes were this big, and they were made from, those days, the incinerators burned the garbage, and all that was left was ash, hard as rock, like moon rock. So now picture this. You're a little kid charging up with a gang, trying to get to the top of Bryan Avenue and throw the other kids down the hill. And what you do is you get garbage can covers to protect yourself from the ashes that are raining down, like in a movie. So I remember they're throwing the ashes, and my friend, whose father, he was the toughest kid of all. His father was the one who wound up with the bar. I won't mention his name. We'll call him Bobby. Bobby would always lead the charge up the hill and grab the other kids and take the ashes out of the hand and throw them down the hill. So they're throwing ashes down on us. And I remember to this day, my head gets hit with an ash. I don't know how, because how do you get hit in the back of the head with an ash when you're charging up a hill? But I did. Leave it to me. And I feel blood trickling down my neck. So I said, okay, I'm out of action. Take me to the medic. No one takes you anywhere. So I had to go home to have the blood taken care of. So I'm afraid to go to my mother. She was a rather nervous woman. Poor woman. I didn't go in that house, in that apartment. I go to my aunt, the Russian aunt, who was as sober as a medic on the front lines in World War One. So she would say to me, Michael, sit down. Let me see. And right away she'd examine. She pulled the hair apart. It's nothing. It's a scratch. And she'd go get the peroxide and the iodine and a bandage and put me back into the street. That was if I went to my mother would be on the floor screaming for a doctor to come to take care of her. It's okay. God bless her. She was a nervous person. So those were the days, my friend. We thought they'd never end. No one shot anyone. No one stabbed anyone. There were no perverts in the neighborhood. Anyone touched a child, they died. Oh, you heard me right. Anyone touched a child, they probably found them dead floating in the Harlem River. Well, it was the Bronx River, actually. I used to see from the window of the apartment we were in way out to the Bronx River. I always loved water. I always wanted to be near water. That's where I live now, next to water. Everyone wants to be near water usually, or mountains or water. But even if you're in the mountains, you want to be near water. It's just a human thing to be near water. It's instinctual. There was once a story, which I told you before. I'm coming to the conclusion of part 3, which will wrap it up for the day till Monday. And I thank you for your listening. Give me the like button. Go to michaelsavage.com for the podcast. That's all you got to do to keep this going. I got to see the numbers go up, or I'm going to say it isn't worth it. I'll do it anyway, probably. I don't care one way or the other. I'm not in this for the money anymore. I don't need the money. I don't want the money. I give the money away at this point. So I'd look at the Bronx River, and a story came down that up on the Grand Concourse, someone touched a kid or molested a kid. And the men in the neighborhood, they didn't call 911. They didn't check a book on what to do, apparently, and I don't know if it's true. The men in the neighborhood who the kid was touched, they took the pervert and threw him off the building. That's all. It was done. The way it would be done today in an ethnic community. That's the way they would do it in Mexico, Venezuela. That's what they would do. That's why they're very low child molestation in those countries. They don't let it happen. A homeless takes his pants down and craps outside a restaurant. They throw him into the river with crocodiles in Mexico. But here in San Francisco, they're invited to and given the key to the city. What's the solution to all of this? If I had it, I wouldn't be talking to you. I'd be doing it. I'm merely a talker. On YouTube, on Michael Savage podcasts. It'll go up on Twitter later. We're not doing the mutual, the joint. We're doing separated. It's been a wonderful, wonderful time with you today, 45 minutes. That's all. That's all, folks. Thanks for listening. With God's will and your listenership, I shall return on the Savage Rap on Monday, whether you're from Staten Island or San Bruno, and I know I'm being heard around the country, because my buddy, John Tobacco of Newsmax, I'm not on Newsmax anymore. I don't talk about it. I'm not there. Mutual, gone. John is still on. He called me yesterday. He said, Michael, he said, I got buddies in Staten Island. They come to me and say, Savage is doing a new thing called the Savage Rap. We can't wait till it's on every day. It's 6 in the East. Thank you, John, and thank you all from Staten Island. I hope one day to come to New York and have some real Italian food in Staten Island. Now I got to hit the buttons. There we go. I think it says end stream, midstream, end stream.